True crime is and always will be an unsettling topic to research and discuss. It deals with the darkest and most depraved depths of humanity. And while that is often what draws many of us in, an interest in why some people do the things they do and why things happen a certain way, it's also capable of giving us sleepless nights and feelings of anxiety, as today's video might show. Join us for today's episode as we examine 3 unsettling images linked to unsolved cases. Brianna Maitland. 17-year-old Brianna Maitland was last seen on Friday, March 19, 2004. That morning, she completed an exam to earn her GED. The teenager's life had been somewhat turbulent over the last 6 months after she had decided to move out of her parents' home in East Franklin, Vermont, in order to be closer to her friends and gain some independence. In the months after she left home, however, she struggled to find somewhere stable to live, often stay with friends for a few weeks at a time before moving on. As a result, she ended up dropping out of school. However, in late February 2004, she moved in with her friend, Jillian Stout, in Sheldon, Vermont. And now that her life was more secure, she decided to enroll in a GED program so that she could finish school. After finishing the exam, Brianna met with her mother, Kelly, to have a celebratory lunch. According to Kelly, all went well. Brianna seemed happy and discussed her university plans while they ate. After finishing their meal, they did some shopping and ran some errands. But while standing in the queue to check out at one shop, Kelly recalled that something outside seemed to grab her daughter's attention, something that made her appear distressed and agitated. Brianna told her mother that she would be right back and left the store. Shortly afterwards, Brianna and Kelly reunited, but Brianna said she had to go and get ready for work. At the time, she was employed at the Black Lantern Inn, a restaurant in the town of Montgomery. Since Kelly didn't want to push her daughter into talking, she opted not to ask Brianna about what she'd seen, and instead dropped her home between 3:30 and 4 p.m. That would be the last time Kelly would see her daughter. Unfortunately, several days would pass before Brianna was reported missing. Her roommate Jillian was away all weekend and did not return home until Monday the 22nd, when she found that Brianna wasn't there. However, she assumed that Brianna was simply staying over at someone else's house and was not immediately alarmed. It wasn't until she didn't hear anything on the 23rd that she contacted Kelly, inquiring about Brianna's whereabouts. Upon hearing that her daughter wasn't home, Kelly began calling Brianna's friends and relatives in search of answers, but nobody had seen or spoken with the 17-year-old, and she subsequently contacted law enforcement. The following day, Brianna's parents were shown a picture of a 1985 Oldsmobile 88. It was Brianna's car. Unbeknownst to them, the vehicle had been found abandoned at what is known locally as the Old Dutchburn House, an abandoned building on Route 118 in Richford, just a mile from the Black Lantern, on the afternoon of Saturday, March 20th, the day after Kelly last saw Brianna. It had been backed up to the side of the building, a piece of plywood lying on the trunk where it had been removed from a window. A Vermont State Police officer had found the car, assumed that it had been abandoned by a drunk driver, and had it towed. Inside were a couple of Brianna's paychecks, while outside was some loose change, an unsmoked cigarette, and a water bottle. Investigators found that several people had passed the car on the night of Brianna's disappearance. One man saw it between 11:30 p.m. and 12:30 a.m. and believed that the car's headlights might have been on and the doors were open, though he saw no one in or around it. Similarly, a second man who saw it between 12 and 12:30 a.m. saw a turn signal flashing on the car, while around 4 a.m., an ex-boyfriend of Brianna's passed it on his way home from a night in Canada. He thought he recognized the car as Brianna's, but didn't stop to investigate. He noted that he saw nobody in or around the vehicle. The following morning, many passing motorists stopped to take photographs of the eerie scene. One such person reported finding a water bottle, loose change, and a bracelet or necklace on the ground near the automobile. Despite the bizarre clues and the fact that Brianna hadn't been heard from in 5 days, investigators initially believed that Brianna was a runaway. They combed the area around her abandoned vehicle and investigated using scent dogs, but they found no evidence of the missing teen. Sometime afterwards, law enforcement declared that foul play may have been involved in Brianna's disappearance, while the FBI observed that her car had likely been left where it was in order to make it appear as if she'd been involved in an accident. Authorities established that Brianna had made it to her shift at the Black Lantern Inn on the day she was last seen. She left the restaurant at around 11:20 on the night of March 19th, telling co-workers that she planned to go straight home because she had a shift at her second job the next day. However, she never made it to that second job. They also discovered during their investigation that she had a physical altercation with a former friend 3 weeks before the disappearance. The ex-friend, Kelly LaCrosse, reportedly repeatedly hit Brianna in the face at a party. Brianna declined to respond, despite the fact she had trained in martial arts. She later filed charges against LaCrosse, but they were dropped when Brianna vanished. 1 week after the disappearance, Vermont State Police received an anonymous tip which claimed that she'd been abducted and was being held against her in a house in Berkshire, about 10 miles from Montgomery, where she worked. The address given to investigators was a rental property, and at the time, 2 men were living in it, Ramon Ryans and Nathaniel Jackson. The 2 were known drug dealers from New York, and on April 15, 2004, the property was raided by police. Though an abundance of drug paraphernalia was discovered in the home, there was no sign of Brianna. No evidence recovered indicated that she'd been inside the building. Authorities soon learned that the 17-year-old was acquainted with the 2 men after friends alleged that she had experimented with hard drugs some time before she vanished. Later that year, police received a statement from a woman who implicated both Ryans and Jackson in Brianna's disappearance. The woman wrote in graphic detail about the alleged murder, which occurred about 1 week after Brianna was last seen, and stated that it was a result of an argument the teenager had with Ryans because she'd lent him money to purchase cocaine. The woman added that Brianna's body had been stored in the basement of a home belonging to a recently incarcerated woman, and that it had been dismembered and disposed of at a pig farm. Despite the signed detailed account, however, authorities were never able to corroborate the claims. Meanwhile, Brianna's family stated that they had received various anonymous phone calls alleging that their daughter was tied to a tree in the woods and that her body had been dumped in a lake. Over the next decade, there was little movement in the case. In 2006, a woman resembling Brianna was seen on CCTV footage at a casino in Atlantic City, New Jersey. The identity of the woman has never been established. 6 years later, law enforcement theorized that her disappearance was connected to infamous serial killer Israel Keys. But this hypothesis was later discarded. The most notable break in the case came in 2022, when investigators announced that DNA they'd taken from an item near Brianna's car in 2016 had finally been matched to an individual. Detectives gave little away, stating that the unidentified person had been very cooperative and that just because the person had been identified, it did not automatically make them a suspect. The match came as a result of genealogy testing. There have been no major updates since. 17-year-old Brianna Maitland was last seen on March 19, 2004, when she left the car park at the Black Lantern Inn where she worked in Montgomery, Vermont. Her green 1985 Oldsmobile 88 was located the following day at the side of an abandoned property about 1 mile from the restaurant. Brianna has been missing ever since. She is described as a white woman with brown hair and hazel eyes. She is 5 foot 4 inches tall and weighed around 105 pounds when she was last seen. Brianna also has a scar on her forehead near her left eyebrow and has a piercing through her left nostril. If you have any information about her disappearance, you can call the Vermont State Police tip line at 1-844-84-88477. A reward of $40,000 is available for anyone who can lead investigators to Brianna or her remains. Lisa Guerrero and Brandon Rumbaugh. 19-year-old Lisa Guerrero and 20-year-old Brandon Rumbaugh were, by all accounts, an ordinary young couple who were deeply in love. To celebrate their 1-year anniversary, the couple planned to book a trip to Disneyland, but their arrangements fell through, so they decided instead to camp at Bumblebee Road for the night, about 1 hour from their home in Scottsdale, Arizona. The couple were only able to spend 1 night away from home as Brandon, who worked as a personal trainer, had work early the following morning. On the evening of October 17, 2003, the pair set off. Lisa's mother, Paula Guerrero, recalled calling her daughter while she was en route to Bumblebee Road. I asked her if she was there yet. She said, "No, we're not there yet, Mom. We still got many miles to go." I said, "Okay, just be careful." That's the last conversation I had. Bumblebee Road is located off Interstate 17, with investigators noting that it was a desolate part of the desert that is more popular today for partying than it was back in 2003. The following morning, both families grew concerned when the young couple didn't return home as planned. Paula remembered the day that she went missing. "I knew that there was something wrong." Call a mother's instinct. I didn't know what it was, but I knew there was something. She began calling her daughter's friends and relatives, asking if anyone had seen or heard from her. They hadn't. Paula then reached out to law enforcement, but it wasn't investigators that discovered the pair. Instead, it was Brandon's friends. When he didn't show up for work, they journeyed along the I-17, looking for the area that Brandon had described camping in. Eventually, they found themselves on Bumblebee Road, where they discovered Lisa's mother's truck, which she had borrowed for the trip. Walking around the back of the vehicle, they saw the bodies of Brandon and Lisa still in their sleeping bags. Authorities believe that the couple were attacked when they were asleep or getting ready to go to sleep. Commander Tom Bolts of the local county sheriff's office told ABC News, "There's evidence that Lisa probably woke up at some point during the attack, but we can't say for sure right now." Following the autopsies, it was determined that both Lisa and Brandon had died of multiple gunshot wounds, with the bullets coming from a .25 caliber handgun. Investigators briefly suspected a murder-suicide, but changed their minds when they realized the gun wasn't at the scene. At this point, it was deemed to be a double homicide. Lisa's mother would later observe that some items were missing from the truck: Lisa's keys and a camcorder they'd borrowed from Paula. The most notable clue in the case, however, came in the form of a disposable camera discovered at the scene. It had been broken in half, leading authorities to suspect the damage had been done to render it useless. Investigators learned that the pair had purchased it just before beginning their trip to Bumblebee Road from a grocery store in their hometown. One of the photos pulled from the camera was of Lisa hanging out in the bed of the truck, looking happy and at ease. Another image showed Brandon doing the same. His face is more expressionless than Lisa's, but still, there is nothing to indicate that something is amiss. Lisa's mother doesn't believe her daughter's expression is genuine. She stated, "It wasn't her smile. It was like she was scared and she was smiling." The strangest picture on the roll was an overexposed image that's difficult to make out beyond a hanging ceiling light and possibly a trailing plant. Some online sleuths see a window beyond that, while others believe they can make out a shoulder. Investigators suspect that the photograph was taken inside a local business, which had been a restaurant back in 2003, though other reports state that investigators have not conclusively determined where the photo was taken. They've noted that it's the last image captured before the two were killed. There have been few updates since. At one time, authorities speculated that the murders were linked to those of Lindsay Cutshaw and Jason Allen, another double murder in which a couple were found dead inside their sleeping bags. However, a man named Sean Michael Gallen would later plead guilty to the latter killings, and he is not believed to be involved in the deaths of Lisa and Brandon. Despite the lack of leads, investigators are optimistic that the case will be solved. They noted that hundreds of people were near the area at the time of the attack, and they investigated many of those individuals in the weeks following the crime. Commander Tom Bolts told ABC News, "There are still persons of interest. There are a lot of people we've interviewed, a lot of people that we've investigated. We can't say any of them are no longer a person of interest. A lot of people are still on the radar. They hope that forensic advancements will help them find justice, or that the passing of time will cause someone who knows something to come forward." If you have any information about the murders of Lisa Guerrero and Brandon Rumbaugh, you can leave a tip anonymously at the number 1-800-932-3232 or submit a tip using the link on screen. A $10,000 reward is available for any information which leads to an arrest in this case. Julie Pacey. On the morning of Monday, September 26, 1994, 38-year-old Julie Pacey left a home she shared with her husband, Andrew, and their two children in Grantham, England, and headed out to work at St. Peter's Day Nursery. She returned home at around 2:45 p.m., but left another half hour later to go to the shops. Several witnesses saw Julie in her Audi driving down Highcliffe Road, not far from her home. Around this time, bizarrely, while she was driving, a man in blue overalls was seen walking up that same road and stepping out from the pavement onto the road itself, causing the mother to almost hit him. Once her vehicle passed, the man turned around and ran towards a car. This was the last time Julie was seen alive. Horrifically, it was Julie's 14-year-old daughter, Helen, who discovered her mother's body. She returned home from school at around 4:15 p.m. to find her mother dead on the floor of their upstairs bathroom. A later autopsy would show that Julie had been sexually assaulted and strangled to death, with authorities determining that a cord had been used to kill her, and that death had occurred very shortly before her body was found. Though her clothing remained on her body, some items had been disarranged. Very little was amiss inside the home, but it was found that a watch she'd purchased on a trip to France was missing. It has never been recovered, and there is some speculation it was taken as a trophy, as it was an inexpensive accessory, though some police officers believe it was possibly given as a gift. As investigators began delving into Julie's life, they discovered several suspicious incidents which they felt may have been related to her murder. On September 23rd, just 3 days before her death, a schoolgirl, walking toward the Pacey home where she would wait for her mother to collect her, saw a strange man approaching the family's driveway. As she got closer to the house and approached his door, the man walked back out and passed her by. She described him as wearing brown workman's boots and blue overalls, being chubby and looking around the age of 35. She added that his face was all pink, indicating that he had a reddish complexion. Upon entering the Pacey home, Julie asked the girl if she'd seen the man. She told the girl that she heard a knock at the door and assumed it was her, but instead it was the man asking for directions to Estelle Road. This little girl later helped to make a chilling, detailed e-fit of the suspect, which was circulated amongst the public. Another strange incident possibly linked to the case was that the Pacey family car was an Audi 80, but several witnesses believed they'd seen Julie driving a 5 Series BMW shortly before her death. At around 2:50 p.m. on September 26, the day of the crime, an acquaintance saw the vehicle turn into the driveway of the Paceys, in which the Audi was already parked. Nobody in the family knew how Julie would have access to a BMW, and no one in the family owned one she could borrow. However, investigators believed the sightings, as many of the witnesses were people who knew Julie fairly well, and knew that the Paceys only owned the Audi. Authorities found Julie's case to be completely baffling. There was no sign of a break-in and no evidence of a struggle, with investigators noting that her manicured fingernails were in perfect condition and unbroken. And though the motive was determined to be sexual, the exact reason why the mother, too, was targeted is still unclear. Notably, on the day of her death, a BMW matching description of the one previously described by witnesses was spotted speeding away from the home at 3:20 p.m., around the time Julie encountered the man in blue overalls while driving the Audi on Highcliffe Road. There were several sightings of the man in blue overalls between the 22nd and 27th of September all across Grantham, including the estates where the Pacey family lived. Such witnesses told investigators that he was always asking for directions to various locations, but never required them to repeat the instructions. The morning after Julie's death at around 9 a.m., he was spotted kicking grass in his estate as if looking for something, and he later entered a shop in the town center where staff described him as acting totally suspiciously. He was still wearing his blue overalls and is often referred to in the media and by witnesses as Overalls Man. In the weeks following the murder, the police spoke with witnesses, interviewed neighbors and friends, and stopped people passing by to ask if they had any information to share, while the e-fit of Overalls Man was distributed to every resident on the estate where the Paceys lived. Her parents suggested that the perpetrator knew of their daughter, noting that she was attacked in her home on the one day she wasn't babysitting, and at the time before her children got home from school. 3 years later, in 1997, one detective on the case said that the crime was premeditated. For years, Julie's case lay dormant. In 2015, however, a second appeal was made on the BBC's Crime Watch program, where it was revealed that a DNA profile of the killer had been extracted from the evidence, though it did not match anyone in the UK National DNA Database. The police asked that Overalls Man step forward so he could be ruled out of the investigation, although he never has. Shortly after the airing of the program, The actor who played Overall's man in the reconstruction of events for Crime Watch was reported to police because he bore such a resemblance to the original E-Fit from the 1990s. As the police did not know that the man was the actor used in the program, they took his DNA, which didn't match the crime scene. Steve Watson, the actor, stated that he has been accused repeatedly over the years by people approaching him on the street, and he was once even arrested by the police. When he turned up to film the reconstruction, he stated, "My face was on the screen for too long." And even then people in the streets said, "Oh, is that the murderer?" To hear those words, you think, please, it's just a reconstruction. Surely you understand. But unfortunately they don't. Julie's case is still unsolved. If you have any information about her murder, you can contact Crime Stoppers anonymously at 0800-555-111. And there you have the facts. Please leave a comment down below with your own theories and reactions. And remember to like this video and subscribe to support the channel. Thank you for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you next time.